Have you ever wondered why some people take magnesium, vitamin D3, and vitamin K2 religiously and still struggle with low energy, poor sleep, or joint pain? The truth is, just because a supplement is widely recommended doesn't mean it's right for you or even safe in the way you're currently using it. In fact, research now shows that the benefits of these three powerful nutrients depend heavily on when you take them, how you combine them, and whether your body is in the right biological state to absorb and utilize them at all. Let's start with a simple but critical insight from physiology. More is not always better, especially when it comes to fat-soluble nutrients like vitamin D3 and K2, or when magnesium is taken in isolation from your lifestyle, your stress levels, or your calcium intake. Here's why that matters. Vitamin D3, for example, helps regulate over 1,000 genes, many of which impact immune function, brain health, and calcium metabolism. But without enough magnesium, you can't convert it into its active form. And without vitamin K2, that calcium might go to your arteries instead of your bones. That's not just suboptimal, that's dangerous. A study published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism found that individuals supplementing with high-dose vitamin D, but without adequate K2 intake, had a significantly increased risk of arterial stiffness, a known precursor to heart disease. That's not what most people imagine when they reach for a health supplement. Meanwhile, magnesium, the fourth most abundant mineral in your body, is crucial for over 300 enzymatic reactions, including those that impact sleep, stress, and focus. But too much at the wrong time, or in the wrong form, can actually lead to diarrhea, sluggishness, and impaired absorption of other key minerals like zinc or calcium. So, what's really going on here? What's happening in your body is a delicate symphony of biochemical signals. And when you start supplementing without understanding the timing, synergy, and form of these nutrients, it's like trying to play a concerto with half the orchestra missing. This isn't about scaring you off supplementation. Far from it. It's about empowering you with the right framework, the neuroscience, physiology, and behavioral science you need to make smarter decisions for your health. In this episode, we'll break down the real science behind these three popular supplements, and more importantly, we'll explore why your magnesium may not be helping your sleep or your mood, the critical mistake most people make with vitamin D3 that increases their cardiovascular risk, how vitamin K2 acts as a traffic cop for calcium, and what happens when it's missing. A simple way to know if you're taking the wrong form of these nutrients, when to take each one based on your circadian biology and stress levels, and the exact dosing strategies top researchers and clinicians are using today. If you've ever taken a supplement and wondered why it didn't work, or even made things worse, this is the science you need to hear. Before we start, I want you to share your problems and questions about health issues you are observing in your body. This will help me understand what are most common issues, and I will discuss them in my next videos. So let's dig in to the topic. Stay with me until the end. Most people think of magnesium as a natural sleep supplement. And yes, it's true, magnesium can help you wind down, especially at night. But that view is incredibly limited. In reality, magnesium plays a far more foundational role in your nervous system, from how your brain handles stress to how well your muscles contract, and even how efficiently you produce energy at the cellular level. Let's break it down. Magnesium is required for over 300 enzymatic reactions in the body, and many of them involve ATP, your body's energy currency. But here's the part most people miss. ATP is biologically active only when bound to magnesium. So when you're deficient, your cells literally can't power themselves correctly, but it doesn't stop there. In your brain, magnesium regulates the activity of NMDA receptors, which are involved in synaptic plasticity, learning, and memory. In plain English, without enough magnesium, your brain becomes more excitable and more prone to stress, anxiety, and even poor cognitive performance. One 2018 meta-analysis in Nutrients found that individuals with low magnesium levels were significantly more likely to experience symptoms of depression and anxiety. What's happening in the brain is a kind of overfiring. Neurons firing when they don't need to, and circuits becoming overwhelmed by input that would normally be filtered out. Have you ever felt overstimulated by minor things? Lights too bright, sounds too loud, people too intense. That's often a nervous system struggling to regulate itself. And magnesium deficiency can be part of the reason. The reason this matters is that many people supplement magnesium without understanding which form to use for which outcome. Magnesium citrate, for example, is great for digestion, but too much can cause loose stools. Magnesium glycinate is more calming. It binds to glycine, an inhibitory neurotransmitter. Magnesium threonate, perhaps the most exciting, crosses the blood-brain barrier and has been shown in animal studies, Neuropharmacology 2010, to improve learning and memory by increasing synaptic density in the hippocampus. So when someone tells you, take magnesium for sleep, the real question should be, which kind, how much, and when. Here's a simple behavioral tool to use. If your primary concern is sleep, consider magnesium glycinate, taken 1 to 2 hours before bed, ideally paired with a winding down routine and dim lighting to support melatonin release. If your goal is cognitive function and stress resilience during the day, magnesium threonate at a dose of around 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams of magnesium threonate, yielding tilde 144 milligrams elemental magnesium, in the morning or early afternoon may support better focus without sedation. And if you deal with muscle cramps or constipation, magnesium citrate, usually taken with meals, can watch your tolerance. Now, here's where things get especially interesting. Magnesium also modulates the HPA axis, your brain's stress response system. It literally blunts the release of cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone. So when you're under chronic stress, you deplete magnesium faster. And when you're low on magnesium, you feel stress more intensely. It's a vicious cycle. But it's also an opportunity. By timing magnesium strategically and choosing the right form, you're not just managing symptoms, you're directly influencing how your brain responds to life. And one final point here, magnesium works best when your lifestyle supports its function. That means consistent sleep, real food with leafy greens and seeds, and limiting caffeine and alcohol, both of which deplete magnesium. The supplement is only as effective as the system it's entering. Now we'll look at something just as important and far less talked about, how magnesium and vitamin D3 work as a biochemical team and why taking one without the other can leave both underperforming or worse, cause harm. And if you're finding this breakdown helpful, I'd love for you to subscribe. This channel is about making real science usable so you can make smarter, safer decisions for your brain and body. Let's keep going. Vitamin D3 has been called the sunshine vitamin, and for good reason. Your skin produces it when exposed to UVB rays, plays a key role in calcium absorption, immune function, and even gene expression. But here's what most people, and even many physicians, don't talk about. Your body cannot activate vitamin D3 without magnesium. Let's unpack this. When you consume vitamin D3, either through sun exposure or supplements, it first enters your bloodstream in an inactive form to convert it into the biologically active form called calcitriol. Your body relies on a group of enzymes that are magnesium dependent. In fact, all three of the major enzymes involved in vitamin D metabolism require magnesium as a cofactor. So what happens when you're taking vitamin D3 supplements, but you're low on magnesium? You end up with a buildup of inactive vitamin D in your system, which can show up on blood tests as normal levels. But your body can't actually use it effectively. You might still feel tired, foggy, or get sick often. And worse, your risk of vitamin D toxicity increases because your body can't convert or regulate it properly. A 2018 study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that individuals with optimal magnesium levels were far less likely to have low or high vitamin D status, suggesting that magnesium status helps regulate and stabilize D3 levels regardless of supplementation. Think of magnesium as the key that turns on the engine. Without it, you're pouring premium fuel, vitamin D3, into a car that won't start. Here's a practical example. Say you're supplementing with 5,000 IU of vitamin D3 per day, a fairly common dose. If your magnesium levels are suboptimal, which is true for up to 50% of the US population per NHANES data, your body might only convert a fraction of that to the active form. The rest builds up unused, and that's when problems can arise. Symptoms of this mismatch can include muscle weakness, fatigue, irritability, or even calcium complications like kidney stones or vascular calcification. What's happening in your brain and body is a kind of biochemical traffic jam. Vitamin D is signaling your gut to absorb more calcium, but without enough magnesium to activate it and enough vitamin K2 to direct it, that calcium has nowhere safe to go. So what can you do? Here's a simple tool to apply. If you're taking vitamin D3 regularly, make sure you're also getting around 300 to 400 milligrams of elemental magnesium per day, ideally from both food and supplements. Dark leafy greens, almonds, pumpkin seeds, and avocados are great dietary sources. If supplementing, magnesium glycinate or threonate, as discussed earlier, are gentle, bioavailable options. And here's a habit-based protocol to consider. Morning, take your vitamin D3 with your first meal, preferably one containing some fat to aid absorption. Later in the day, take magnesium, either with dinner or 1 to 2 hours before bed, depending on the form and your sleep needs. This spacing mimics how your body would naturally produce and regulate these nutrients, and it supports both absorption and utilization. Now let's address the elephant in the room. What happens when you absorb more calcium from vitamin D3, but it doesn't end up where it's supposed to? Because the absence of one overlooked vitamin, K2, could determine whether that calcium strengthens your bones or stiffens your arteries. But before we move on, if you've been learning something new here, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below sharing your biggest insight so far, and consider subscribing if you haven't yet. We're building a grounded, science-driven community here, and your voice matters. Let's say you're doing everything right. You're taking vitamin D3 to improve your immune health, support your bones, maybe even boost your mood. But behind the scenes, something potentially dangerous is happening. Calcium is getting absorbed into your bloodstream, but instead of going to your bones, it's ending up in your arteries. This isn't just theoretical. A 2015 study published in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology found that high serum levels of vitamin D, when not accompanied by sufficient vitamin K2, were associated with increased arterial stiffness, a key early marker for cardiovascular disease. The science behind this is straightforward but often ignored. Vitamin D3 increases calcium absorption in the gut. That's its job. But where that calcium ends up, in your bones, where it strengthens, or in your arteries, where it hardens, depends heavily on vitamin K2. Vitamin K2 acts like a calcium traffic controller. Its job is to activate proteins like osteocalcin and matrix glyprotein, MGP, which literally guide calcium to your bones and teeth and keep it out of soft tissues like blood vessels, kidneys, and joints. Without K2, calcium becomes a loose cannon. And over time, this misplacement can lead to calcification in places you don't want, including the coronary arteries. Have you ever heard of someone who takes calcium supplements, eats clean, and still develops heart issues later in life? Is maybe part of the explanation. It's not just how much calcium you have, it's whether your body knows where to put it. What's happening at the cellular level is like this. Vitamin D says, let in more calcium. Vitamin K2 says, here's where to send it. Without K2, the message becomes incomplete, and calcium accumulates where it shouldn't. Let's bring this into real-world terms. If you're supplementing with vitamin D3 and magnesium but not including K2, here are some subtle signs your calcium regulation might be off. You experience muscle cramps even though your magnesium is on point. You notice joint stiffness or poor flexibility. You have mildly elevated blood pressure or a feeling of tightness in your chest. These aren't diagnostic in isolation, but they can be subtle flags that something's misfiring in your calcium metabolism. So how do we get this right? Here's a simple evidence-based protocol. Pair your vitamin D3 with vitamin K2, ideally in the MK7 form. MK7 has a longer half-life in the body than MK4, meaning it supports calcium regulation throughout the day. Doses of 100 to 200 milligrams mil daily are commonly used in clinical practice. Take both with your first meal of the day, ideally one containing fat for better absorption. Vitamin D and K are fat soluble, meaning they're absorbed best with dietary fat. Continue magnesium intake later in the day, as previously discussed, to ensure full enzymatic activation of vitamin D. Think of this like a nutrient triad: vitamin D3, vitamin K2, and magnesium. They work together. Leaving out one disrupts the harmony. And here's an empowering reframe. This isn't about fear. It's about precision. You now know more than 95% of people taking supplements off the shelf. And that gives you the power to not just protect your health, but to optimize it. Now, we'll dive into the actual forms of each of these nutrients, because even if your timing and pairings are right, taking the wrong form, the wrong chemical structure, could blunt the effects completely. And if this kind of deep dive into actionable science is valuable to you, hit the like button. It tells the algorithm to keep showing you grounded, empowering content, and it helps this community grow. Let's get even more specific next. If you've ever stood in the supplement aisle staring at 10 different bottles of magnesium, vitamin D3, or K2, wondering which one actually works, you're not alone. The supplement world is full of labels, claims, and confusing terminology, but here's what science and clinical experience shows. The form of a nutrient dramatically affects how your body absorbs and uses it. Let's start with magnesium. There are more than half a dozen common forms, but each has unique properties and ideal use cases. Magnesium citrate